everyone, and thank you for joining us at this virtual session at the Nairobi International Book Fair. This is PublisHer Circle. PublisHer is a worldwide community of female publishing leaders who are working to address the gender imbalances in the publishing industry, especially at the executive level where the disparities are the greatest. The PublisHer Circle is a new kind of conversation where the speakers engage with one another directly, ask each other questions, and make conversation together, allowing the discussion to evolve naturally. My name is Emma House, and I'm the founder of Aurum Group, a consultancy focused on the international publishing industry. And today I'm going to be joined by 4 inspiring women from 4 different countries. I'm going to start with the home territory by introducing Wanjeri Gakuru from Jalada, Africa, here in Nairobi. Welcome, Wanjeri. Wanjeri is a freelance journalist, essayist and filmmaker, and in 2018 was elected managing editor of the Pan-African Writers Collective, Jalada, Africa. She does lots of other things as well, which we haven't got time to go into this morning, but she's a very inspirational publishing entrepreneur. Next up, we have Richa, the founder of Pickle, Yolk books in India. If you haven't read a Pickle, Yolk book to your child, I recommend you do so. Beautiful children's books. And Pickle, Yolk was a 2-time finalist as Publisher of the Year at the prestigious Publishing Next Industry Awards in India. Jade Robertson is International Publishing Director at Austin Macauley. Jade is actually based in Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, but is overseeing the UK and all emerging markets for Austin Macauley. Welcome, Jade. And last but not least, Sarah Savitt, publisher at Virago, which is an exciting imprint of Hachette here in the UK, dedicated to books by women. So perfect that you could join us as well, Sarah, for this PublisHer Circle. Welcome to you all, and once again, thank you to the audience for joining us. We're going to be starting the conversation today by talking about the publishing industry around the world and the crucial role that women play in it. But before that, I want to break the ice by asking each of you a question, which doesn't relate to what we're going to talk about today, but it's a way of getting to know you. So first question, and I'm going to go to you, Wanjeri, first. Have you ever lied in a job interview?
Me lied? Well, I will say I am a storyteller by profession. And if some storytelling has happened and has enabled me to get an opportunity, well, I'm just using my talents. So that is the answer that I am giving.
Sarah, what about you?
So I haven't exactly lied. I don't like to, my boyfriend always notices that I never lie. I just sort of don't say the truth exactly and maybe say something else. But so I worked at Faber for about 10 years. And when I applied to be an editorial assistant there, I really, really wanted the job. I just not got funding to do further study at university, was having just a bit of a, quarter life crisis. And I had to come up with a project to sell it, like a sort of publishing initiative to celebrate Faber's 90th birthday. And I just couldn't think of one. And my boyfriend at the time came up with a great idea and told me that I could use it. So I pitched his idea and they loved it. And it was only about 2 years later that I confessed to my boss that it was it was Ewan's idea, not mine. But I didn't lie. I didn't exactly say it was my idea, but I just didn't say it was someone else's.
You just said here was a great idea.
Oh, sorry. It was an idea from your household, so it kind of counts.
Exactly, like coronavirus. We were in a bubble, an ideas bubble. So thank you to Ewan. Now my ex-boyfriend, but thanks.
And Jade?
I wouldn't say that I lied, but I think in our industry, sometimes we kind of exaggerate the truth. Going back to what Wanjeri said a little bit, we do end up becoming like storytellers. So I would say that I didn't lie, but maybe exaggerate the truth a little bit. I started out, you know, when I was just out of university, so I didn't have much experience to go off then. So yeah, I would probably say I exaggerated the truth back then.
And Richa?
I think one of the perks of being an entrepreneur is you never really have to face the interview panel. So I've never really had to do that. But yes, I mean, I've sort of exaggerated, as Jade said, once in a while when you're talking to a prospective sort of funder or whatever. I mean, then you do tend to sort of exaggerate numbers a bit, but that's about it. It's not lying.
Exactly.
I agree.
I remember my first job interview that I ever did for my first job in London, turning up and thinking I was going for a job somewhere else and not realising, had no idea what job I was interviewing for. And so I just asked a lot of questions to try and figure out where I was actually interviewing for the job. And I got the job because I was so curious and asked a lot of questions. So,
Wow.
the advantages.
Smart.
Well, I think we've managed to get to know each other a little bit. So we'll move on to talking about the topic at hand, which is, you know, what's it like to be a woman in publishing, and are there any advantages and disadvantages? Again, Wanjeri, let's start with you, and what do you think?
So I'm in a kind of unique position because Jalada is first and foremost a writers collective before it is a digital publisher. So it's essentially this bunch of writers who are committed to helping each other, but we've created a platform that we've invited other people to come and share their work in. And so, so my cat just crosses the frame. So being elected to be the leader of the collective and then also the collective activities is really such an honor. And I am the third managing editor, and I'm the first woman. In fact, myself and my deputy editor are the first. Well, no, we've had a female deputy editor before, but this is the first time we've had two women in positions of leadership. And it's been really interesting, you know. So can I just like put her in a room somewhere, please, because she'll be doing that. Is that okay? Sorry, guys. One moment.
Well, Sarah, why don't you jump in and talk to us about what it's like being a woman in publishing in the UK, where we have an abundance of women, but not necessarily in senior leadership?
Yeah, so in the UK, I work, Virago is ultimately owned by Hachette, which is about 70-75% women, and I believe that that's pretty much true across the industry. But yeah, you're right, exactly, that as the higher up that you go, the fewer women there are. And the UK government a few years ago mandated that any company over 250 employees publish their pay gap. And lots of publishers had pretty terrible gender pay gaps. So there's been a lot of political activity within publishing houses and with the union to try to address that. And I guess about sort of around 5 to 10 years ago, a lot of the major publishers here, the sort of big corporates, were run by women, white women, I should say. All those women retired, and they were pretty much all replaced by white men. So obviously, there's other issues, as I'm suggesting, other than gender. Obviously, very huge sort of gaps and disparities, and just lack of people who are white and middle class, and even just people who aren't from London. So there's lots of different issues, but yeah, in terms of gender specifically, I think a lot of women publishing felt like that was quite disappointing, that there'd been a sort of step backwards. In some ways, it was just a coincidence that all of these jobs had been taken by white men, but it seemed like a pattern. But saying that, I do think the gender pay gap reporting has really helped companies reckon with that, and also I think it's inspired a lot of companies, including Hachette, to do other kinds of pay gaps. So we've now published an ethnicity pay gap, and I think it's also just reminded everyone that data is important and numbers are important, and that's not the whole story. Like, there's stuff about culture and lots of other things, but actually it's really helpful to have data. And I think publishing, can often seem like an art, but it's important to look at numbers and data, and So, and that it definitely with, you know, in terms of, you know, sort of who's included, who's excluded. So there's been a lot of good changes. And also I think, you know, publishing is very flexible. You know, I had a baby last year, and I had just incredible support from my colleagues who had children, and, you know, in terms of what it was like to, you know, to give birth, but then also to return from maternity leave. And so I found that, yeah, you know, that was wonderful actually to have that support of all those other women around me.
That's great.
Sorry, that was a really rambling answer, but
no, I think
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry, I'm in the office and my cat isn't here. Our cats can't meet, I'm sorry.
I think you pulled out something really important there about how publishing can be a great career for women, given the flexibility and given that it is female dominated, that you've got a lot of understanding and shared experiences around you, despite the other disparities that the UK industry suffers. So I think you've pulled out some good advantages there. Jade, what's your experience? I mean, you've got experience in different countries, both the UK, but also where you are now in the UAE as well, and in other territories. What would you say are the advantages and disadvantages?
I'd say that obviously starting out in the UK when I was lower level, I did notice I was interacting with more women, and then as I sort of progressed in my career and I got to more of a senior level, it was mostly male dominated. And I think being that, sorry, I keep bringing my age into it, but I'm quite young as well, it was quite difficult to gain that respect of the people that I was speaking with, and to kind of, you know, get across, you know, what I'm trying to do. When I broke into the Middle East market, it was interesting at the time because it is very male dominated, but within the UAE over the last couple of years, there's a lot more females, you know, in high level positions here, which is nice because we help each other and we have that unity together. So, you know, we're trying to, you know, bounce ideas off each other, or work with each other to come over obstacles, or, you know, if there's anything that we struggle with. I think it's been an eye-opener for me, just to deal with not only being in the Middle East, but also dealing with all, you know, the different cultures and the traditional elements of it. But I think I've overcome it, and I kind of get the way that you need to maybe approach things now within this territory.
And Richa, let's hear the Indian experience.
So two things. I mean, in the broader Indian context, it would be very similar to what Sarah and Jade said, because the industry is pretty much in pay. It's almost 75% women, but that as you go higher up, the number of women at the absolute top level goes down. But for me personally, within the industry, I have never, not once have I felt myself being at a disadvantage or advantage. I mean, you know, I feel it's a pretty neutral ground sort of thing for me, because of being a woman. I mean, there's a lot of respect coming your way if you are doing a good job, and that's something I have seen across all the different ancillaries and all the appendages that are a part of you know, the publishing industry, so to speak. I mean, whether it be the distribution chain, the printing chain, the whatever. I mean, and these are pretty male-dominated areas in India. I mean, you hardly find a woman in at least the distribution channel or the printing world and all that. Yeah. But I've never had a problem, and I mean, I've sat down with the printer at the printer's press at 2 a.m, not faced a problem at all. In fact, you know, there's a lot of respect that you get if they feel that you're doing there's awe, there's respect. I wouldn't really want to see it as an advantage or disadvantage. I mean, I'm just there as a professional, and I'm being taken as one. That's it.
That's great. That's great to hear.
Cool. So I'm really interested. When I was reading all of your bios, I found that you are those who shared like a little bit of personal stuff about themselves. I was really interested about how you were kind of drawing from this other interest, and how, if any, in any way, if they reflect in your publishing interests. So for example, Sarah, I know that you work with the UK Feminista. Richa, you love traveling. And I wonder, does that inform your publishing interest? Do you draw from it? Does it influence you in any way? We can start with Sarah. We can go Sarah, Richa, and then Jade.
Okay, thank you. When we shared our bios, I said that I'm the chair of the board of a feminist campaign group called the UK Feminista, and which actually was founded by the first ever author that I published at Faber. So she's called Kat Banyard, and she's this really, really amazing campaigner, feminist campaigner. So I've worked with her in various guises for a long time. And I guess my parents are both very political, but in a sort of grassroots way. So my mom's really passionate about animal rights and the environment, and so she took me on a sort of anti-fur protests when I was like 8 years old, and we volunteered at the Humane Society together, and my dad and I would talk about politics and who to vote for locally and stuff. So I guess I grew up in a political environment, and in Vermont, home to Bernie Sanders and Ben and Jerry's. But I guess I knew that I probably wasn't suited temperamentally to being an activist, and I also was interested in business. So for me, working at Virago, which was set up as a feminist publishing company, and we don't just publish books about feminism, but we see feminism as saying women can write and read about everything. And also, by the way, everyone should read books by women, not just women. We see it as
a perfect job for you, Sarah.
Exactly, yeah. So it allows me to be an activist, but while reading and sort of being a bit more behind the scenes. Like I'm not going to be someone who's out. I don't really like marches, and So this is, for me, is a good way to combine those things. It really does feel like my dream job, and I hope that by being a little bit involved in grassroots activism, I can kind of bring that back into the publishing as well. So that feels amazing to me. Like it feels like such a privilege to be able to combine like an outside interest as well. But I'd love to hear from you, Wanjeri, as well, because you do so many things. And I really want to hear you compare film and publishing. But anyway, we can.
That's probably why I asked that question, so I can answer it myself.
Yeah, that was the question I wanted to ask you. But anyway, we can go around.
Okay, so yes, my love for travel, and I travel mostly alone now. And I think that also dictates the kind of, when you're traveling, you're exposing yourself to a lot of risk, and you're going to all sorts of places that you haven't been before. And I don't know a single soul there in any of the countries or cities that I go to. And I think so temperamentally, I am more attuned to taking risk, and that is what informs my, the manuscripts that I'm attracted to, that I instantly take to, and I want to publish. So there's a little bit of that risk-taking element, which is very much there, a part of the list that I'm doing there. And you see, India in that sense, the picture book market is just about nascent, in that growing phase. I wouldn't say it's matured fully. And therefore, to be able to take those kind of decisions, tough decisions on whether a book, it may not be marketable, it may not be commercially viable, but you just go ahead and do it because you feel it's going to be, you want to do it. And so I guess, yeah.
Nice. What about you, Jade?
So, my actual passion initially lied in media. I was in media for a few years and I studied media, but I always had a love for reading from when I was young. I was always going to like the library readathons and, reading my Roldo books, 100 times over at home. So I always had that passion for reading, and I was involved in a lot of English classes, activities after school. And then I went down the media route, and I'd always had a passion for business. And then I kind of got to the point when I was sort of, about 19, 18, and I thought, media is not something I want to take career-wise. I realised it's more of a passion, not something I can see myself doing long-term. So I ended up going into the business route, and then I saw some advertisements in publishing. I started to look into it, and I just felt like it was a good home for my skills because it's got the creative element and an analytical element as well for the business side of things. So that's why I applied for editorial, and then where I am today. So that's how it started off with me, really.
Yeah, it seemed like everything was kind of like merging together.
Yeah. And still today, I love it because I get to use that creative element of my brain as well. Although I'm not doing like media related things. We do like, some like the video graphics for the book trailers and things. I have a bit of a hand in that, although we have a team, but it's just because I enjoy it. So yeah, it's nice.
And Wanjeri, we're desperate to hear from you.
Yeah, you stole my question, I will be honest.
Oops, sorry. I'm happy I went fast then. So in my particular instance, I trained as a journalist, and I've been a journalist for about almost 10 years now. And I feel like I'm just learning new mediums of storytelling, essentially. So I call myself a storyteller, and I use these different mediums. And when I came into the position of managing editor, I realized that we primarily publish in our journals a lot of fiction, a lot of poetry, and a lot of essays, and some visual art. And I was really, really interested in expanding that. So through the people that I've interviewed, through the things that are of interest to myself, I've been able to invite that into the collective and kind of slowly grow that side of ourselves. And I like also what Richa said, that, you know, that adventurous spirit, that ability to play that is available in other segments of my life, I've been able to bring them into what we do. So for example, in 2017, we traveled across the greater East Africa, putting on Africa's first mobile literary and arts festival in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and DRC. 28 days in a bus. It was just madness, but it was a result of 2 years of thinking and planning and fundraising, and then going on the road. And so that kind of flexibility, that kind of expansion of the mind that was already for me there as a creative individual, I was able to bring that into the project that we were putting on. And so that's how I've always been kind of like drawing from the other spaces and saying, what can we do? And not just like my work as in Jalada, but the work that I do in Jalada is also flowing into the other things that I do. So also as a filmmaker, I'm really interested in, digging deep and being as creative visually as, although it is kind of limited because, you have budgets and things to think about, but the way people write stories and how the imagination runs wild, I want to bring that into my films. So I find that everything feeds from the other.
Wow.
So inspirational, so inspirational. I wanted to pick up on something that you said, Richa, about balancing sort of like personal values and things that you love with the commercial realities and imperatives about publishing. I mean, how do you manage that?
Should I go first?
Sure.
Okay, so for me, it works because I operate on a very, very small scale, because I'm a niche publisher. In India, you'll be surprised. I mean, it's a huge country with, the kind of population that we have. Even a Penguin Random House would not do a picture book more than, the print run wouldn't go beyond, say, 3,000. And 3,000 is on the outer sort of, is the outer limit. So you can imagine the very, very small market that we have for picture books in India. So therefore, I think it works better for me as a smaller publisher, so that I can do smaller print runs, and yet by being there at the grassroots level, I'm able to, I can say, connect very well with the readers. So I know my end consumer much better than what, say, a much larger publisher would be able to do it, because I'm doing everything on a very personal sort of level. And because I have my, the economy, the operational sort of costs for me are very, very low. I work from my home office, even outside of the pandemic time. So, things haven't really changed for me in that sense. And therefore, because if I have to say print 2,000 copies, I know that there will be, if it's a difficult book that I want to publish, I know I will find those 2,000 people in India who will, connect with what I'm trying to say through that book. And therefore, it's not all that difficult. And word of mouth really works very well for smaller publishers like I am. So, I don't have that sort of a difficulty. In fact, there are many times when authors come to me with their extremely difficult sort of tricky sort of manuscripts, and they say, oh, we've gone to all the other bigger publishers, and they've said you must go to a smaller publisher like Pickle Yolk because they'll be able to handle it better. Because there's much less to lose for me than there is for the bigger ones. So it's never been that difficult, actually.
Do you think you feel like the people who are buying your books because you're an author and illustrator yourself, and like you're meeting kids and parents and librarians
all the time. So for me, that really helps because I'm in constant touch with my end consumer reader, be it the schools, be it the authors, be it the parents, the students, children. So it really has worked for me in that sense so far. It's just been 5 years, but I've had a pretty neat run, exciting run in that sense.
Yeah.
It helps.
Can you tell us where Pickle Yolk comes from, the name?
Okay, so it's more like a grandmother's thing. It's come down from there, because my grandmother used to love pickles. I mean, she's until some years ago, she used to make pickles at home.
Wow.
And growing up years, we used to have this television jingle which had just come up that, you've got to have an egg a day to keep yourselves healthy, etc. It was in Hindi, but it translated into something like that. And when I was thinking of a name for my imprint, I felt it just fit in so well, because I wanted to do books which are equally fun and yet have that substance in them. And I felt a mix of the two. You have the yolk from the egg coming in for the substance bit, and the pickle for that tangy little fun element, and it just fell together. I mean, it sort of came together nicely.
I love that it's from your grandmother. That feels very fitting for the yeah. But I love it as a phrase, pickle yolk. Yeah, I like saying it.
Yeah.
I have another question for you. You mentioned in your bio as well that you read 4 picture books a day from different countries. How do you select those 4? And are you buying these books, or are you reading them on Kindle? Because that's a lot to get through a day,
Yes. So because I travel a lot, until say last year, I was buying books like crazy. I mean, any new country I would go to, I would sort of just come back with loads and loads of those books. And each of those books that I would buy, I would make sure that I sat with the salesperson, the shop person there, and got them to read it out to me. Otherwise, it's in a different language and I wouldn't really understand what's there in the book. So, I know what the story is about. So that's one. And also now being a part of the Depictus family, so for me, it's like every morning I get up, there are those new additions to Depictus, the picture book maker website. And for me, it's like a wonderful resource, and beautiful picture books out there from all around the world. And there's just so much to learn.
And picture books is quite a universal language as well, isn't it? So
yes. So yeah. It
pick
really
up sort of like different cultures and learn different things through picture books without necessarily having to know what the words actually say.
Yes.
We seem to have, and hopefully she'll rejoin. We're obviously in a time of pandemic, and certainly here in the UK, they announced yesterday we're going back to level 4, and we're going to face a huge amount more restrictions probably for the next 6 months, which is quite depressing. But how has COVID changed things for you guys personally and professionally? I mean, have you got used to a new normal, or have things changed drastically? I mean, Sarah, you've got a new baby. That must have been tough entering into the pandemic with a young one.
Yeah, well, sort of, it's a funny mix actually, because so I came back from maternity leave part-time like just before lockdown. So I think I made it into the office about 6 times before lockdown. But actually we were really lucky in that we had childcare during lockdown, because we have a nanny and she lives nearby and she lives by herself, and so we just formed a bubble with her basically. So in some ways it was great, because I was able to, from May I've been working full time, and I've been able to do that, but also I've been able to see my daughter much more, and sort of pop down and hear her giggling away. And so, and I think also coming back from maternity leave, I was sort of thinking, you feel a bit, I was really looking forward to coming back to work, but you feel a bit self-conscious, like I've changed, my life has changed, but actually now everyone's lives have changed. And so, having a baby seems like very low down the level of sort of life changes. So actually it's felt quite leveling in that way. And because, so many people were working with, kids sort of climbing out, our MD was chairing acquisitions meetings with a crying baby in his lap sometimes. So it was, it felt kind of leveling that way. And also, I'm interested to know in other people's markets, people are really reading here. And so our sales have been pretty strong, and Virago's lucky we have an amazing backlist. You can see some of the books behind me. So Daphne du Maurier, Rebecca, people have been really reading, like both our front list, but also, those classics. So people have been wanting to read Maya Angelou, Margaret Atwood's backlist, Daphne du Maurier, Nora Ephron. So it's actually, been a kind of wonderful time to see people engaging with books more, especially I think now people have so much Zoom fatigue. So, but yeah, I'd be curious to know if, are people reading more in other countries?
Jade, how is it for you?
I mean, I think initially talking on a personal level, I'm so busy all the time. So when we went into lockdown, for me, I kind of had a bit of a shock. So I thought, okay, what do I do with myself now? So, I mean, I found a newfound love for cooking, for example. I mean, I was buying all these recipe books online and, just had this newfound love for my kitchen and buying many things on Amazon and stuff. So, I was filling my time up with that. But just in terms of going to reading, I mean, we are quite fortunate enough that we work with a lot of distributors for our ebooks online. We did initially have quite a bit of a struggle in terms of fulfillment, just because we couldn't fulfill our printed books, especially in this market. But we did manage to overjump that hurdle, and we come up with solutions and ways that we could prevent that. But I think for us, we focus more on online and selling out ebooks, just while we had the short-term downfall with physical books. And I mean, we're back in the office now. We have been since June. We're quite fortunate here that there's a lot of regulations in place that protects us, and they was doing sanitizing every evening, and we wear our masks, so we're quite fortunate enough that we have that safety. So I mean, it was strange initially, and like I said, we're so used to running around, and I'm so used to going to events. I'm at event, at M&O's, I'm at an event probably every other week or every month. So for me, it was a time to actually think, okay, let's look into new areas of things that I can do to develop myself personally as well. Because I think where I'm so busy with traveling and with publishing, it's been a bit of a hectic few years. So for me, it was actually nice to feel a bit more grounded and to develop myself a little bit through cooking and many other things that I was doing.
Hands up who misses book fairs.
Yeah, I do. No, but I think Zoom, I mean, we've all got now. I think we're very fortunate enough to have this because we're still getting that FaceTime. I know we're not interacting personally, but I think we're not losing that personal touch. It's still there, even if it is through video. And I have noticed that I'm waving at people now on Zoom, which I would never do before. So yeah, it's interesting. I think your behaviour does change.
Yeah, I mean, Wanjeri, we're talking about COVID and the impact on us both personally and professionally. I mean, how has the pandemic been in Kenya, and how has it impacted you and book selling and people reading? What's been happening there?
Well, it took a while for us to get a handle on things, but at least our government we took a while to close borders, which was like our main problem, that we were having infections coming in from outside the country. But within the country, it took us a while to accept wearing masks and kind of limiting our activity, because we are very social people. And I was even just talking to my friend the other day that people just have this desire to converge. And I really get it, the whole waving thing on Zoom. You just want to connect with people. And so it took a while. But for us, luckily, we are a digital publisher, so primarily all our content is available online. So we've been having an increase in traffic on our site, which is really, really wonderful. We've also changed how we're sharing our content online and how we're engaging with individuals. And in fact, our next anthology is on the theme of nostalgia, which is really inspired by the time that we're living in, because we kind of wanted to document this time, maybe not too directly, but kind of what other ideas are kind of coming up in this time, now that we have time to reflect, and that current affairs are speaking to matters that have been systemic and have been troubling us for a long time, and kind of reached the critical point. So looking back, kind of how did we arrive here? So for us, honestly, it's just been taking it a day at a time. My team works across everywhere. My board secretary is in Nigeria. Our visual arts editor is in Australia. So for us, this has been our reality, how we operate. I think it's just now kind of factoring in, mental health. Even when you're having our long meetings, we're okay, let's take a health break for 15 minutes, people go off, make a cup of tea, come back. So yeah, so for us, it's just kind of scaled up, because this is the only thing that's available to us, and we have a frequency of our meetings now. But regarding other booksellers in the space, people are innovating, holding a lot of conversations online. I've seen bookstores that are brick and mortar now having a lot of online presence. There's been a lot of really wonderful free events, which is just like the best part of all this, not needing to travel and just like seeing the authors that you love, doing presenting conversations on not only their work but other topics. I think it's been really, really wonderful that people are eager to connect and are so generous with their time. So I think that's been the thing that I found, the change that I have also really enjoyed the most myself also as an individual.
And sorry, just touching a little bit on what Wanjeri said, I think with having the events online now, it's opened up a lot more opportunity for us, I would say, because we have the opportunity to go to events that we'd never go to before, in different countries. So I'm learning about different markets and new strategies we're coming up with and how we can break into different sectors. So I always say to my team, you've got to look at it. I know we're not going to the physical trade fairs, but it's actually opened up more doors for us to, learn more about different markets and go to events that we wouldn't have went to before, because, events are expensive at the end of the day. So a lot of them are free, which, like you just mentioned, that's something that I think we should touch on.
Yeah, and I think it's like we've been thinking in terms of readers, like it opens up in terms of accessibility, for people who can't get out, whether that's, like carrying responsibilities or just money or sort of disability. It's great there are more online events, although I'm also aware that for some people they don't have there's one laptop in the house or there's no laptop in the house, or so it's like the statistics here about thinking about schools and how many kids just they can't do online school. So although I think it's made events more accessible for a lot of people, then there's also a bunch of people who might have gone to an event at a library, their local library or school or something, which isn't happening now. But I'd love to know, obviously this is an online event that we're doing, but what like great author online events that people have been to, or like interesting formats that you've seen, because I agree it is quite exciting sometimes to see people who you think, oh, you'd never have come to London, or I don't have to hire a babysitter. Great.
I can let you know one that I really do, and I think what's also really wonderful is that previously most events were not recorded. It was you're there because also it's a ticketed event, so it's a privilege to be there and listen to the author. Now they have live events, and if you can't attend them, they post this stuff on their website or on YouTube later. So even if there's the one laptop in the house, maybe through a system of scheduling, you have your half hour or an hour to dedicate to watch this thing. So this year, the Edinburgh International Book Festival went online for the first time. Instead of cancelling, they cancelled it like earlier in the year, but then were able to do a digital festival, which was much more reduced. And so I know, because I took part, we were producing some events alongside a particular programming that they had developed. But just going back and looking at all the events they produced, it was so wonderful that this festival, which is quite prestigious, is able to present this thing available for everybody to enjoy and access. And I think they're talking also, because they have this, because I've been there before, they have this really wonderful accessibility. I mean, how they build their ramps. They have some events have sign language interpreters or captioning, really, really very accessible. But now that it's online, it means people who are also having trouble getting visas coming into the country no longer have that issue. Like the barriers are removed tremendously. And so I think that's a really good upside of this. So I would say I'd recommend the book festival, International Book Festival.
Do they have people signing for their events online as well? Or?
They have people signing up. So they had this really cool thing where it was limited to about, I think, 50 books, but I could be mistaken. Maybe not. Maybe it was more. But the one that I saw, they had people purchase a book and have a virtual signing event, a one-on-one face-to-face with the author in, I think, a Zoom thing like this. And so you come and then you say, this is the name of the person I want you to sign the book to, and then the book is then delivered to you afterwards, which I thought was really innovative and kind of not exactly face-to-face, but something a little nice, I thought.
That's cool.
I was going through all of ours. I mean, the whatever we have been doing all this while. Wanjeri, Jalada, for instance, it's a Pan-African association that you have. Jade, you are pretty much doing the entire Arabic world, the way you're handling everything. Sarah, I'm sure yours is a global sort of perspective that you take when you're picking up books for yourself. So what is it, I would like to understand, what are the kind of decisions or the decision points that go into, what all are you factoring in when deciding what works as a pan across all areas, So Wanjeri, for instance, how do you define a pan-African book, something that will work everywhere?
All right, it's a really good question, actually. So again, we are Pan-African Writers Collective, but we're a digital publisher. So, and our books are really just journals, anthologies with fiction, poetry, nonfiction, and visual art. And how we decide on what works for us, what we'll pursue, is really just deciding internally on a theme that we find is important or interesting to us. We've covered insanity, we've covered Afrofutures, we've covered language, we've covered fear, and now we're doing nostalgia. So for us, we try and find an idea that will cut across the different genres and that would inspire people to write interesting responses to the question. Like our last issue was on bodies, which is very, very broad. And even in our call out, we say what we're looking for and we also say what we're welcoming. Other interpretations, as long as it's exciting. So for us, it's the theme. And if we find a really, really delicious theme, then we get really fantastic responses. So that's kind of like where we get our how we slice that. how we you know what I'm trying to say, that one.
That's interesting because I've lived in Nigeria for a while and I know Nigeria is very different from Ghana, which is very different from Kenya. So each of these markets would have their own peculiarities, and yet you have a Pan-African collectible. So it's, Jade, what about you, the Arabic world? I mean, again, each of these countries will have their own distinct cultures.
We deal with a lot of authors, not just in the UAE, but in Saudi, Kuwait, Bahrain, and in Syria or Egypt. So, I mean, the market is relatively similar. Initially, one of our main focuses is to translate from Arabic to English and English to Arabic, which we have done with some of our titles and are looking to source others from publishers. I'd say children's books does have a big market here. Probably there's more growth, I would say, in Arabic children's books. There's quite a good level of English, but I mean, Arabic children's books is an area that we're focusing on at the moment. I'd also just say they have a strong interest here in like anything to do with self-help, self-development. They like anything sort of, like a true story, as long as it's censored. Poetry is a big thing because a lot of the Arabic people, they write poems within their families from a young age, so they're very into poetry. I mean, all of their Arabic songs, for example, they're all basically either poems that have been translated and adapted into songs, or all about love. They're very romantic. So yeah, anything like that, yeah, they do like. So I mean, but it does depend on the market, obviously, and where we're targeting as well. So.
And Sarah, what about you? I mean, yours would be a world sort of perspective that you take.
So we're based in London, but usually, as a sort of baseline, we would have rights to sell, into the Commonwealth and into Europe. Occasionally, we also do sell into the US and Canada as well. I guess it's just about knowing, like some books definitely, I think internationally, like for example, I published this really wonderful novelist called Sigrid Nunez. She's based in New York, but her heritage is kind of German, Panamanian, Chinese, so she is. We published her book called The Friend a couple of years ago, which won the National Book Award, and it just really took off in Australia. And I think that was partly just because like our Australian sales team, they just loved it, and it was partly about a dog, and like loads of them have dogs in the office, and like I don't know, it just sort of like everyone read it there, and they just really pushed it, and the indie booksellers loved it, and so we're just about to publish her new novel, and and I sort of think we'll probably sell more copies in Australia and New Zealand than like the rest of the world combined. Couldn't have necessarily predicted that, but I guess Australia and New Zealand we do tend to find is more influenced by American media, so things that are New York Times bestsellers, or like I published the Two Women Behind the Call Your Girlfriend podcast, and I know that did quite well there. But then, there are other books that are about, we published one a couple of years ago about the British welfare state, and we knew that, that was not going to be international, but actually she had a really interesting base and sort of connections here with, you know, social workers, teachers, government officials and stuff. So I think it's just about being clear about what books definitely don't have international potential and just not bothering the international sales team with them. But the ones that do have, like, really, yeah, pushing them. And I mean, you can find out a lot through social media as well. Like, to, you know, if someone has, you can look at their followings, you know, or like if people have podcasts or whatever, you can have a look. And then there's, yeah, things like the Secret News, which I wouldn't necessarily have predicted, but it's just that, yeah, people loved her book. they love her writing. So yeah, I guess it's very like book by book, I think. But yeah, it's brilliant. You know, with Secret, it's wonderful to sort of, you know, see like, you know, a New Zealand indie bookshop window dedicated to her fiction. Like, it's amazing to be able to, yeah, to see that kind of thing. And yeah, she gets a kick out of that. So yeah.
That's nice. I have a question for you, Emma, if that's okay.
Sorry.
I like this, turning the tables.
Yeah.
That's not fair.
Obviously, you know, we're aware that, you know, you just started your consultancy quite recently. So, I mean, I think that was before the pandemic. I mean, every time I open my LinkedIn, I mean, you amaze me, Emma. Really, you're everywhere, and you really do inspire. And not only me, I'm sure a lot of women across publishing. So, you know, we do thank you for that. But how do you feel that it's been sort of, you know, navigating through the corona situation and the pandemic? I mean, do you feel that it's opened up more opportunity for you in terms of what you do? And I mean, how have you found that, you know, what's been going on?
I think it's opened up a lot of opportunities, I think, both for me personally. I think one thing that I've absolutely loved is not only seeing these online events for writers and being able to see the Jaipur Literature Festival online or see the Edinburgh Book Festival online, but also having conversations like this. You know, I just can't imagine that had the pandemic not occurred, this conversation wouldn't have taken place. And I see lots of like-minded communities that are popping up online. So one thing that I've loved in India seeing, Richa, is how the local language publishers have come together and have their weekly conversations.
Conversations on Thursdays, yes.
Yeah, and I just don't think that would have happened had the pandemic occurred. And so to see those communities popping up online and to be able to participate in a lot of those conversations, I think for me, I've learned so much. I've also had to hone my skills when it comes to Zoom and other platforms. And I've taught myself how to run Zoom webinars, which again, I wouldn't have done before now. And it's quite rewarding, I would say, when you can put on an event, a digital event, and you'll generally get a good number of people engaging, no matter what the subject is, because there's a real thirst for people to engage and hear that, and people can dial in from any parts of the world. So I think those networks, those events, those personal skills that I've learned have been great. I've also found work. I mean, I was quite worried entering the pandemic, would I get any work? And I'm a bit like you, Jade. I'm quite reliant on traveling and networking and meeting people, and that's what publishing is about. But I've been busier than ever, and I'm doing things I never imagined I would do. I'm working on 2 projects, pretty major projects, one here in the UK and one out of Canada, with people I've never met before. And I've been working with them for 6 months, and I've still never met them in person. And again, you just can't imagine that would have happened before the pandemic. But it's been great. So for me, amidst all of the doom and gloom and some of the awful experiences that people have gone through, for me, I feel like there has been a bit of light at the end of the tunnel, and a little bit of a silver lining for the things that would never have happened before. I think one of the real downsides, and we touched on this earlier, was how it's highlighted the digital divide. And Sarah, you spoke about this a lot. And I think Wanjeri, I've just done quite a big project researching the book markets in English-speaking Africa. And you really do notice the digital divide now. And that digital divide was always there, but the impetus to now close that divide is even stronger. So again, it's highlighted something that's terrible and not great, but it's really spurred on the impetus to close that digital divide and create a much more equal society when it comes to having digital access. So that's a very long-winded way of answering your question, Jade, but I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about this and thinking about the good things and the bad things and what's it highlighted and how can we address those issues that have come out. So yeah, that's been my experience over the last 6 months, and I hope we can go back to traveling. I do miss it, and I do miss seeing people in real life, but I'm grateful for conversations like this that have really kept me going as well.
I think it makes you more adaptable, and you know, it teaches us that, you know, to, not that I'm saying we don't appreciate things, but I don't think we realise just how important that trade show and that physical, you know, meet face was until we didn't have it. So I think we've done well on, you know, the fact that we're doing these kind of seminars and conferences. It's really advantageous for our authors and potential writers, and obviously to keep the community of the publishing together. Thank you, Emma, for that.
and you know, it's been great seeing people like the International Publishers Association get involved around the world, and you know, we've met people that we never knew about, which is great.
That's nice. I think that goes back to open up opportunity for people to actually come to these events that might not have been able to come before. So yeah, I think that's something we can take away from this.
I wondered, there's been quite a lot written about how women are maybe bearing the brunt of the pandemic in terms of picking up more sort of caring responsibilities, and yeah, I wondered if you like come across that in your working lives, or you know, yourselves, or with colleagues or writers that you work with, or Emma, if that's come up in any of your consultancy work.
I have met quite a few people that have been really struggling with where they've not had childcare, they've not been able to see family, and trying to manage that work-life balance, I think has been tricky. And I think, you know, as you said earlier, Sarah, I think publishing is quite adaptable in that respect, in that there's a lot of women in publishing anyway, and publishing has had to be adaptable. But I think it's shown how the industry can be even more adaptable, and how employers can be a lot more flexible than necessarily they thought they could be. And I think that's partly because we're all in this. It's a lot harder for perhaps to make allowances for one person, but when everyone's in that same situation, I think employers will come out of this having learned a huge amount about their team, about the struggles that their teams have that perhaps they've kept, you know, hidden behind that professional facade. So I think again, that's probably something good that's come out of that. I don't know what other people have experienced. Wanjeri, how have you found it?
Well, so Jalada is largely a volunteer-run organization. So we get funding when we put together projects, and we get grant support. And for the last year or two that since I became managing editor, I've been actively pursuing opportunities for us who are working within the collective and who are submitting work to us or engaging with us in any way to get rewarded. And you find that the first thing that happened is that all the cultural opportunities for funding, limited opportunities for not just for ourselves and the work that we do, but even the people who are giving their time. And so you've had to be very generous around, you know, thinking about deadlines and schedules for things. So we have a hard deadline for something we want to do, but we're very flexible around that. And we found that kind of just checking in with people regularly and saying, how are you doing? How are things going? That has really, really helped, because before, I mean, we were always doing that, but now we understand truly, how are you doing? Are you in your, just kind of showing up for each other in that way, even if it's just emotional support, it's come to be something that's very important. And what I've found to be really interesting is that maybe it's just the way that I am as a person, but or maybe it's my leadership style, but previously we had 2 male managing editors, and their styles were like, they are leading from the front, and they were really, really creative individuals. But I found that maybe this approach of mine that's a bit slower, that's a bit more, you know, caring and talking to the people is kind of what was needed in this time. So maybe we kind of lacked out in that way. Yeah, or maybe I'm just, you know, deluding myself, I don't know, but so far people are engaging and talking to each other and taking care of each other beyond the work that we all need to do.
Yeah, I've definitely noticed that at work too. It's everyone's like barriers are a bit down, whether they want to or not. So yeah. What about Jade?
I mean, I would say that, I mean, for us, it's been interesting because we used to communicate on Skype, but now we've got all these different sort of Skype groups, obviously, because we've got the international teams and stuff, and it's actually been really nice to see everyone say, you know, good morning, like as if you're in the office, how is everyone today? Oh, I'm just popping for lunch, have a great day, you know, does anyone need anything? So I think everyone's been really good. It did take them a while to adapt to that. But yeah, I mean, we've been having more frequent meetings. Wanjeri touched on earlier, you know, just letting everyone just have a break, all right, you know, go grab a coffee, and then we'll catch up a bit in a little bit. So I think because we've been used to working online before, it's not been too much of a big change. But yeah, I would definitely notice a change in sort of just, you know, even just the way we've been handling things in terms of the meetings and the scheduling, and, you know, just trying to be a bit more flexible, because I think before, I think when you're in the office, you're a bit more sort of on to the deadlines, whereas when you're at home, you know, if someone's got a child or something, you know, they've got to go and do their homeschool learning, for example, you know, that's fine, they can do that, they can catch up on their work later on, so we have a bit more flexible in that respect. So
I think sorry, just something really small. I think, I don't know who touched on this earlier, I think Emma, talking about how since we're all experiencing this together, not just the creatives are the needs of the creative, the traditional needs of the creative space, flexibility, creativity. I think that's. So for example, my sister is a teacher, and now they're all doing virtual learning with their students. And that's been a huge shift for her. So already working from home, you know, teaching a class and all those kind of things. And they've been having to adapt and learn. And it's so interesting that now everyone is focused on output instead of it being about, you know, what butt is in what seat and who can I see from, you know, from my little cubicle, who am I watching? And I think that kind of shift is very radical and very important, because I think, you know, we kind of see each other as human beings instead of kind of like machines of production. And I think that's been one of the things that I've appreciated the most for everybody in my life who is not working in the creative field, that they've kind of been approached how even they view themselves as an individual. They realize that they have to find joy in their work, and maybe they're limited opportunities to change careers, but at least they see like the thing that I'm doing has value, and I am a human being producing this work, and I don't need to be a robot. I think that's been really wonderful to observe.
That's really interesting, because I was gonna, and sorry, I think Emma's gonna ask one question, but Richa, I was gonna ask you like about, you know, how being a writer is like influenced being a publisher, and I wondered if it was like, yeah, that exactly what Wanjeri was talking about, like sort of bringing more sort of like joy and humanity and flexibility, and I don't know, not feeling like it's the publisher versus the writer, which I hope I don't feel like, but I wonder for you if that's always been more
pretty much that, because it's, as I said, I mean, there's no very clear-cut role demarcation that's there in my head. It just flows from one thing to the other, and regardless of whether it's my own manuscript or somebody else's manuscript, you know, it's just, I mean, my mind sees it as a book that has to be done, and beyond the point, you know, I get detached from my own work, so it pretty much becomes somebody else's manuscript. So it's very difficult to sort of say what. I don't know how to, I mean, I feel very, very confused about answering this question, because, you know, it's really very difficult to get inside my head and put one aside and focus on the other, because it's always in conjunction that all the roles are working. And I also edit. I also art direct. So, you know, it's all those things put together. It's
amazing.
So looking forward to 2021, and again, I've been thinking about this a lot myself. What will you continue to do that you've kind of done differently this year already? What will you sort of like continue down that path on doing? And what do you think you'll do differently in 2021? And this can be personally or professionally. Let's start with you, Wanjeri.
All right. So like I said, Jalada is both a writers collective and a digital publisher. And now, you know, we just took that kind of for granted. Well, the reason why we started what we were doing is because we wanted to not be limited by the traditions and everything about the traditional publishing. We wanted to have publish and focus on are so radical and different. And so now we're learning that this is a really, really good medium, and that we can package our work in a particular way, that we can explore other ways of publishing, other forms of publishing. And so that's what we're focusing on now, kind of like a business strategy that looks at what we've produced in the past and what we're able to produce, and looking at the brand as something that belongs to the members of the collective, but has like a value in the publishing world, and just kind of being clear about what those assets are.
Jade?
I think for us, we will continue with pushing more on a different angle on the online strategy, because we've been holding some author events online, and we had one Arabic book, for example. I mean, he's based in the US, and we had a large reader event was happening in the US. They wouldn't have been able to attend. So I think it's kind of opened our eyes up in terms of, you know, that we shouldn't limit our audience reach. So I think we will continue to do that. Me personally, I think it's nice because I'm based in Sharjah that my staff get that FaceTime. So doing the video calls, I'll continue to do that to be more personalised as opposed to just keep doing it on the phone. So yeah, I think I'd take that away from it.
Richa?
Emma, for me, you know, the term universal has taken on a very different meaning now. So even otherwise, when I was doing books, deciding on the manuscripts and all that, it would always nature about them. But now, given the shared experience, I mean, I can't think of any other experience that the entire world in the last 100 years has experienced the way, you know, we are doing now. So that entire term universal and the universality of a book that I'm doing for children, that's something that I will be focusing on more and more over the next over the next several months or the next years or so, because, you know, essentially it has to be that shared story, that shared experience, the shared trauma, the shared hope, you know, feeling of hope, and all those are things which I hope I'm able to now factor into the list that comes out looking forward. That is going
Great. Sarah?
So I think the thing that I've enjoyed in terms of work, enjoyed most about lockdown is that it's actually meant that I've spent more time with my direct editorial team, because we always saw each other in the office all the time, and we were in different meetings together. But now we have 2 Zoom calls a week, just the 6 of us, and I feel like we've become so much closer. And we did a real one in my garden the other day, so it'll be harder as the London rain starts. But yeah, I think it's really taught me about the importance of just having that really, really close-knit editorial team, and sharing things. And in terms of what I want to do, I guess I just want us to take more risks, and for people just to be freer to sort of, I mean, sorry, I'm slightly dodging the question here, but sort of meta answer. But yeah, I think as Jade was saying, you know, this has taught us that like we can adapt really quickly, and that it certainly made me feel freer to say, well, let's try this, and if it doesn't work, then we can do something else next week. And and I think everyone's feeling like that. So yeah, I just hope it means that we just experiment a little bit more, and sort of don't feel like, you know, doing something new is like this big statement, and then if it doesn't work, then it's a disaster. And, you know, that it's just all a little bit more flexible, and that, and I guess to be more upfront with authors about that too. I think it's also led to more conversations with authors where you just say, well, I'm not sure if this is going to work or not, but, you know, this is why we're making this decision now, and let's see how it works. And if it doesn't in a month, then let's change tack. And I mean, that's kind of always what publishing is, but I think maybe we used to be less honest about that. So I hope it just frees everyone up to be a bit more honest about experimenting and trying and failing and trying again.
I love that. I love that idea of taking more risks, and I think that's something personally and professionally I think everyone's doing. You know, everyone's diving into the unknown and being really brave about it, actually. Mm-hmm. Saying, you know, yes, I will try this. I think it is a brave new world out there, and I'm really impressed with the way people have risen to the challenge and just got on with things. And I know a lot of people out there are suffering with mental health and other challenges, but on the whole, I think the braveness that we've seen has been really inspirational. Certainly one thing that I'll take away from this is I've really learned to appreciate where I live. And I've got out and with lockdown, when we couldn't really leave the house, it's, you know, you've got to find new walks that you can go on and discover your local area and make friends with your neighbours in a way that you didn't do before. So that's one thing that I hope I continue to do. But I think I've really enjoyed conversations like this. And as I say, it probably wouldn't have happened had there not been a pandemic. And these conversations, I really hope they continue into the next year, and that we can take time out to have these conversations. I think it's been really interesting, really inspirational, and great to know that there's women in publishing out there like you four. So I think we've come to the end of our time now. I hope our audience at the Nairobi Book Fair have enjoyed this conversation, have enjoyed getting to know 4 women who are doing great things in publishing around the world, and take away some inspiration from it as much as I have. So thank you all for watching, but most of all, thank you, ladies, for joining the conversation, and thank you, PublisHer, for organising this PublisHer Circle. Thank you, everyone.
The clap is
everyone.